when I saw those softs going on, I wasn't sure. Kind of move that Max can only do on Lewis when he sees an opportunity.
Isack did very well to hold him off. If this gets cut from the podcast, we know why. Welcome back to the Talking Ball podcast, powered by Ava Trade. My name is Thommo. His name is Cal. Let's talk Hungary, mate. How are we doing?
Mate, really good, man. What a race. I enjoyed that today.
That was a blinder. You know what? It's one of those where you were constantly thinking it's 70 laps. It's a very short set. And just there were so many factors that played into it that I hadn't really considered before. Like traffic, for one thing. When you've got 70 laps, traffic's much bigger factor.
Yep.
It was guaranteed you had to be 2-stoppy, if not pushing 3 for some people. Yeah, that was a blinder of a Grand Prix. I was locked in.
Yeah, I always find like when I'm watching the Hungarian GP, I always feel like it feels like one of the longest races on the calendar. Like as in you feel like you've been watching it for ages. So much is going on, and then you look and you're at like lap 28, and you're kind of like, how long is this going to go on? But it was just always something going on in the background. There was something to think about. A lot of strategy, a lot of different strategies playing out today, which was really, really good. I enjoyed that race.
And then considering we call this, Monaco with gravel, like you only need one overtaking spot, Monaco, and Hungary surely is proof of that. Please make the necessary changes. I digress, right? Let's talk about Budapest, focusing. Final race before, of course, the summer break. It was very hot. Track temps were kind of mids to low 50s, weren't they? I mean, that plays havoc, surely, over a race distance as well, Cal.
Yeah, it does. And you know what? We've seen so many of those this year with Barcelona, Austria, here. All we're having these ridiculously high track temps. And I think, when you go into a weekend like that, I feel like regardless of the long runs and all the sort of practice you get in FP1, FP2, I feel like you never really know what that track temp's going to do to the tyres until Sunday.
Absolutely. And of course, Grand Prix Sunday, in the end, we get another podium. One of those, mate, it's very strange. And I'm sure, I don't know, like the atmosphere in the garage after a weekend like this where Max clearly very unhappy with the car underneath him, yet is able to put it P2 in the end. Will the personnel in the garage be like feeling any different about this result? Because it is great and we did maximise the opportunity there, but also when the car isn't quite playing ball, I don't know, how does that sit with the team personnel, I guess?
Actually, I kind of look at today and say that as well as it being a great drive from Max and what a move on Lewis, we'll talk about that, but I kind of look at today as the kind of race that you only win when everyone does a good job. And that's what happened, right? Throughout the team, the pit stops were on point. Strategy was a great call. I've got to say, when I saw those softs going on, I wasn't sure. But, all in all, it was a great call. Everything worked out. But it just seemed like they did everything well. So regardless of the car not being exactly the one we want and the one we want to take racing, and yes, Max is always going to be vocal when he doesn't like the way the car drives. But regardless of that, we came out with a great result because everyone did their job well today.
Damage limitation, we talked about this kind of with Kimi this weekend as well, getting that P3 and gaining points on both Lewis and George. He damage limited his week, and I think, we did as well, right? P2's a huge, again, when the car clearly isn't in a spot where we want it to be, balance was tricky. There was a lot of wind blustering around, particularly on Friday and Saturday as well. Qualifying was tough. We're like half a second off the pace. It's obviously not where we want to be, but this is where, it's much bigger than just driver and car. There's a whole group around. And like you say, if everyone's pulling in the right direction and making the correct decisions, then you can recover it.
That's it. And, as well, on the other side of that garage, Isack Hadjar, what a job. The ultimate teammate over the last 2 races. What a great job, Managed to hold up a couple of cars, give Max a bit of breathing room in that second stint as well. Brilliant. We love that.
Absolutely. Look, before we carry on though, let's cut to the drivers. Isack, Max, take it away.
I was still struggling a lot in the race, to be fair, but I think we really maximized everything we could, and just tried to get that result over the line, and somehow that was second. So I'm of course very happy to be on that podium, but it was tough. It was a very tough weekend, but of course to come away with second for us has been an incredible result.
Good start to begin with. Which is something we've been working on, and we've been doing great the last 2 races on that. But that first stint, I really need to understand what happened because completely out of pace. But then on the hard, on both stints, we are doing well. So I need to look deep.
So Cal, look, I think it was a strong lap one for both cars. Good off the line. Max, of course, moving up to P3, and then the defensive job he did on Lewis on the soft tyres behind him, Max on the mediums, first of all. And we've talked about this so many times on this podcast already, mate. We're talking about it again, Max versus Lewis. We love to see it. That was a great scrap.
It was a great scrap. And I think either way, however it had turned out in the end, that's the important thing. I think the thing that stood out to me when I was watching that bit of the race is actually how great these regs are when you're not on an energy-starved circuit, right? I think that today, some of the racing up and down the field, and, Max and Lewis being the battle that I enjoyed the most, but up and down the field there were great battles today. It was great racing. That move, well, what can you say? I think it's the kind of move that Max can only do on Lewis when he sees an opportunity. It was great driving.
Yeah, and again, it's playing to the strengths, because as much as, again, the car wasn't performing on all basis this weekend, on the brakes, Max does feel confident on it. He said this kind of post-race. And yeah, that's a move that, we had one opportunity. Obviously, Lewis did undercut in the pits, and you're watching, you're thinking, oh, that's probably job done. But Max somehow sizes up that one opportunity, makes it stick. Obviously, 2024, that move was very similar. Didn't go quite so well, but he got it done. It was a hell of an overtake.
He got it done, and it was such an important one. It was kind of a race-defining one in that, beyond that, and once he was back in front of Lewis, he had the pace to keep him there, right? So it was a really important move, because I think what we did see today was that even when you do have a tyre offset being behind, it was difficult to find that opportunity. So absolutely crucial one. Max nailed it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, of course, as you mentioned already, Cal, putting on those softs at the end, trying to make them last for as long. Of course, later on in the Grand Prix, your car's a lot lighter with fuel loads. So, tyre management is different in the kind of final third of a Grand Prix. But in the same way, I think Lando last year winning in 25 didn't get the credit he deserved, in my opinion, for making that one-stop work. He managed the tyres, got them to the end. Yeah, it was Max who delivered, and GP said this on the radio post-race, how good a job Max did making those softs survive to the very end. The VSC possibly helped as well, not quite as much pressure from Kimi in the end, but Max just delivered lap after lap, and that's the kind of drive that, again, you're not winning the race, and it's not as dramatic, but it's so impressive to make those softs work to the end.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I had the same questions as Max on the radio when I saw the car coming down the pit lane on those softs, but are we sure? It was a lesson for me as well. Have faith. I should have remembered that from my time in the garage. Have faith in Hannah and her team.
Again, it's one of them where it's like, look, the team's in a situation, and now it's your job as the driver to try and make this work, please. Fingers crossed, hopefully, happy days. And of course, P2 in the end, 18 points. And that's the thing, look, again, you will never not get 100% out of Max. Max will make his feelings clear, and I think that's really important, of course, for the team to hear what the issues were. Feeling quite oversteery, obviously caught Max out in qualifying, the kind of damping in the car as well. But he's never going to give up. He's always going to give it 100%. He's always going to extract the maximum. And again, it's 18 points on the board, which is way more than we thought, even after qualifying on Saturday,
Yeah, absolutely. And, I kind of felt that after quali, it seemed, both Isack and Max, no one was particularly happy with the car. I don't think we would have started the day thinking, oh, yeah, we can put it up in P2. So like I said, it was just a great result for everyone. Perfect heading into that summer break as well.
Yeah, because that momentum is key, right? And even Isack, or starting P8, finishing P6, obviously benefiting from George's bad start and Oscar's retirement. But also Isack, said himself post-race, and we've talked about this again in the past, he wasn't happy with his pace on the medium tyres at the start, but you look at his pace on the hards in those kind of second two stints, and it was much better. So it's one of them where, again, the hard this weekend was the C3, because we have the softest compound for Hungary. And ultimately, as long as the pace is there, that's the key thing. I can't imagine there's anything worse for a driver than seeing no pace and not really understanding why.
Yeah, I think that's probably the worst situation. I think, at least when you're in a situation where you know where the problems are with the car and you have a plan to work on them, I think it's a little bit easier to deal with. When you feel lost, that's like the worst situation you can be in. But yeah, we saw Isack on the hards. The pace was really good. So it's I guess it's about going away and understanding what the difference was.
Yeah, and there was a fast charging George at the end. Like, as much as he had a bad start, he had good race pace. So Isack did very well to hold him off. And of course, now, Cal, summer break time. First question, I guess, how much time are the team going to have to kind of put a post-mortem in on this weekend before then that 2-week break begins?
Well, I mean, it will have started straight away, right? All that live data that's going back to the factory, there'll be teams working on it for the next couple of days until they've got to the actual shutdown, the official shutdown. And then, it is all hands off deck. You know, a full 2 weeks, you are not allowed to go and do Formula One technical work. There will be a proper break for everyone, and then try and pick it up on the other side just before Zandvoort.
How is that break policed? Like, can you give us a bit of an insight? Like, working at a team when that breaks in, do you all get an email like landing in your inbox on, I don't know, like a Friday night being like, don't touch your email? Is it like, are you allowed to look at emails but not send them? Like, I'd love to see a bit more insight from behind the scenes, Cal.
Mate, you're not really allowed to do anything at all. And IT are really good in that they shut down a lot of the internal systems so people can't access them. Because I'll tell you what, when I was racing, there would be times where you'd forget. You'd have your 2 weeks off and you'd be about to go back to work and you'd be like, oh, do you know what? I'll just check my emails. And then you'd be halfway through logging in and then realizing, oh, I'm not allowed to do this. But thankfully, IT already had you covered and you can't log in and do it. So it's kind of important to have those systems in place because it's easy to trip yourself up and potentially cost your team. But I think now we're so used to this period that everybody plans for it really well. And that work gets put down and picked back up as you'd expect. And a lot of the systems, they just won't be accessible. Now, there are some things that can still go on in the factory and that you're allowed to do with obviously maintenance, facilities, these kind of things. But in terms of technical work for Formula One, it is all hands off deck.
And for you, Cal, you know, getting this break in the middle of the season. Actually, I was talking about this to my wife, actually, during the race. She was kind of like, do you think there should be like multiple breaks within the season, like a couple of these breaks spread out or like a bigger break in the middle? Like, again, for you, you know, 15 years on the road, I mean, time like this to spend with your family as well, super important. How do you feel about having like a bigger singular break in the middle?
I like the summer break. I think it's well placed. For me, it always gave me like a light at the end of the tunnel to look forward to, like those breaks, right? So you're like, right, get to the summer break, have a rest, regroup, come back for the second half of the season refreshed and push to the end of it. I think probably what's harder and what I found harder and harder as the years go on is that the season goes so late into the year, you know, into that first week of December. And then by the time you get home from the last race and plus the young driver test that you have bolted onto the end of it to make it almost a quadruple header, it was always really hard because as that season got longer, it just meant that you had an earlier start year on year, especially when you have pre-season tests that seem to push their way further and further backwards into February. It just means that you have very little time over the winter. That time over the winter seems to go really quickly. You might get a full month off, but it just comes around really quickly. I know there were some teams this year that kind of saw this potential addition of Malaysia coming. And I know that back in April, they tried to give mechanics a lot more time off during that unexpected downtime we have. So I think this year, on the one hand, you know, a lot of the teams, they've had some more time off than they would have expected with those 2 cancellations. But FOM are going to claim that time back.
Let's talk Malaysia, actually, Cal. I almost completely forgot about that. How do you feel? Did you ever work in... Was that before your time?
Oh, mate, I did work in Malaysia. I remember it very well, being very, very hot and sweaty. It's Singapore in the daytime, right? If you want an idea of the climate you're working in. But it's one of those places. The racing is really good. I love it. I've got to be honest, I suffer in the heat. And that was always my biggest thing about Malaysia. It's just that how am I going to make it through the week? I am not good in hot, humid conditions, right? I really, really suffer. You can go and have a great night in KL as well. It's always one that people used to look forward to being in Malaysia.
It's a long time ago, so I remember the races very fondly. Hopefully that won't just be, you know, me looking back to the glory days, right? And actually being a bit rose-tinted. Fingers crossed the race will deliver. It's kind of early October, isn't it?
I think we're glad to try and get back as many races as we can after the cancellations. And again, Malaysia, if you're going to try and add a race in somewhere, it's always going going to be a popular place to go back to and go racing. So yeah, I'm kind of glad that they've managed to squeeze another race in. Maybe you and I need to try and find our way to have an away day in Malaysia. We'll talk to our producers, Thommo. Maybe we can try and blag an away day in Malaysia. I'd like that.
If this gets cut from the podcast, we know why. but also, you know what? As well, on top of all that, you know, there is talk about potentially Imola as well being introduced to make it 22 rounds, which would be nice this season as well.
You've got to find a balance, right? Because on the one hand, I'm with you, right? I want to see as many races as we can. But I do say this as somebody who now knows he's not in the garage putting that work in, right? So it's about balance. And I think the thing you have to remember, especially towards the end of the season, is professional burnout is a real thing. It's all very well saying, well, you had time off earlier in the year, and I get that. But also there just comes a point where the workload can be too much. And I always like to remind people it's not just those who are traveling away to the races. It's all the people that are back home, that are families that are trying to make it work as well, that make sacrifices for them to be away. So as much as I want to see as many races back on the calendar, I do think we need to have a little bit of caution and just think about the people that have to make this happen.
Look, 24 race calendar, there's definitely an appetite for it.
Oh,
and
yeah.
that's what obviously we originally would have had from a fan point of view. But again, there's real human beings. These teams are big and the teams are more profitable than they ever have been. So I don't know, is there, I think this is a really important conversation personally. I think, is there a more viable long-term solution beyond what we already have? And what are the things, I guess, that have already been implemented to try and help this that maybe most fans won't have seen?
So teams have their own initiatives. For us here at Red Bull, we started in 2025 giving mechanics the opportunity to take a few races off a year, and they have the ability to plan that and choose their races so that they can make it work with family and kids and all of that stuff, and it's important that teams continue to do that. I think in terms of Formula One and the way that we look at how we schedule races, I think it's just the planning of the travel and trying to make it as succinct as possible without jumping back and forth across the globe. I think that really helps people. Like, for example, the Austria, Silverstone, Belgium, like that triple header is kind of like one of the better ones because you're not going far, right? The flights are really short, and that kind of helps. I think when you have, for example, when we did Vegas, Qatar, Abu Dhabi, that takes a far greater toll on you, right? It's a long way across the globe, and the jet lag and all of those things. So I think, just looking at the calendar, when we know we're going to have this many races, planning as best we can to just try and ease as much of that stress off the people as we can, I think that's important.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more, mate. So look, we're at the halfway point. We are Max P6, Isack P8 in the Drivers' Championship. How do you kind of, reflect on where we are this season? First season, of course, with our very own power unit, which was a massive unknown coming into the year. Where does it sit with you?
Well, I think that's the biggest thing that you mentioned there is the power unit. We came into this season taking on, like, it's hard to put into words what sort of a monumental challenge we set ourselves with this power unit, and then we're here at the last race before the August break, and 4 Red Bull Ford Powertrains cars finished in the top 10 today, right? So I think when you look at it like that, you have to look at, firstly, as this project in particular of Red Bull Ford Powertrains being an unbelievable success so far beyond what others expected of us, but also I think beyond what we thought we might be capable of this year. So from that side, you have to put it as a real success this first half of the season. We certainly expected more gremlins than we've encountered. I think the ones that we have encountered, we've dealt with well and quickly. We've brought upgrades to the car that seem to have made a big difference. There are still some things for us to work out, but you look at the success and the results we've had. There's been some rubbish weekends because that was to be expected, but also weekends like this are an incredible point to be at in this year, which was going to be a learning year. It was going to be a tough year. I think to be at this stage, at this point in the project, I think is great.
Yeah, and so you've got that factor, which is huge. Then, of course, Laurent's not been team principal for all that long, so he's just, embedding his roots into this team. You've got, of course, Isack jumping into that seat alongside Max and doing a really, really solid job. Like, if there was any time for Oracle Red Bull Racing to fall out of that top 4, I think this would be the time. And the fact that we've been able to not only maintain that momentum, but put Max in positions where, he's got podiums, Isaac's been close. Of course, in Monaco wasn't to be in the end with Pierre getting that one back. But, given a car on occasional weekends, I think Austria particularly comes to mind, where Max, on another day could have won that race. That is the time, right? You got so many moving cogs, things changing, for the team to keep that momentum and keep that base level of competitiveness where we are challenging for podiums. I think it's been hugely impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if you look at some of our competitors and what you expected from some of the other competitors out there that have taken on big challenges this year, I think you have to look at where we are and say, actually, we should be very proud of ourselves.
Couldn't agree more. So briefly, let's also reflect on F2, Nicholas Solov. We talked damage limitation. He didn't have an amazing point scoring weekend massively anyway in the sprint. Made a bit of a lunge into turn one, which I think, he'll have to learn from that one. It was definitely in the wrong there against Sebastian Montoya. So lost out in the sprint race. But of course, in the feature race, P7, 6 points on the board. His championship lead is still there. And look, sometimes, Cal, it's not always going to go your way. You're not going to podium win every weekend, but he's still scoring points, and that's what's most important.
No, that's it. Your championship can be defined as how well you manage to get a result on your bad weekends, on the ones that ain't going your way. That is what makes champions. I think there was an old thing that Sir Alex Ferguson used to say, as a long-time Man United supporter, it's about grinding out the result on the days where you're not at your best. And I think, if you've had a weekend where it's not going your way, but you've come away with some points, you've kept your lead intact, and you can just look forward to the other side of it, I think we call that a decent weekend.
Indeed we can. So yeah, we've got a bit of time off, Cal. Any plans personally for the break, or are you going to just be working away as hard as ever?
Well, you know me, mate, I never stop working. I definitely won't be spending any time on the golf course. Actually, me and my partner, we've got a little bit of time to ourselves because our daughter is going on a little holiday. So we're gonna have some days to ourselves. We're gonna chill out for a little while. I'm gonna be on the golf course as ever, trying to get my handicap down, but I'm struggling. But that's about it, mate. And then I'm sort of ready for... You're joining me out in Zandvoort on the other side, aren't we?
Yes, we will be in Zandvoort. Who knows exactly what Red Bull have got planned for us. There's been some very interesting conversations about what potential content we'll be making out there. So make sure you tune in for that down the line, whether it's the podcast or something more. I don't know. We will see. Before you go, though, make sure you head over to redbullracing.com and my paddock. Me and Cal will be answering some of your questions over there straight after we finish recording this. Plus, you can unlock access to some truly unique experiences and some incredible rewards. So we will see you next time, whenever that is. Enjoy the break. Ciao for now. Adios. Goodbye.